Hello everyone and welcome to a new programme for the English speaking section of Satellite TV, Your Comments. So we obviously get a lot of comments on our videos and we do read every single one of them, and we do appreciate everyone taking the time to leave a comment. Now we get many wonderful supportive comments, and unsurprisingly we do also get a lot of interesting, critical and quite provocative comments, and yes, we even appreciate those too. Of course, it's very easy just to have a one-sided conversation where we speak and you hopefully listen. But we wanted to open up that conversation to give you, our viewers, the opportunity to get involved and have your opinions aired as well. So today's video is taking a look back at some of the comments that we received in recent weeks, with our own thoughts in response. So a very popular video recently was the interview of the US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, which ignited several very interesting and rather hotly contested debates in the comments section. Whilst Mr. Garcetti's intervention was widely welcomed by most of our viewers, several felt otherwise. A point that's been widely raised by some of our viewers, and has also been reflected on other videos, is the simple hypocrisy of the US and in turn the UK in criticising India. Oki7 makes a good point when he says, "Where is Western justice, or is it only for Caucasians when they're victims, and for that crime Western democracies create a coalition to invade and destroy nations, without evidence or lies, like supposed weapons of mass destruction? Ouch." And then he refers to Vietnam. Upkarak adds his comment referring to the whistleblower Edward Snowden, who fled to Russia after leaking classified information. What happened to Snowden? What happened to his free speech and Fifth Amendment rights? US government is synonymous with hypocrisy. And Paul Smith doesn't hold back when he adds, "America, American and European have double standards regarding freedom of speech, freedom of express and freedom of gathering," and then criticises the West for not raising its voice over the outrageous treatment of Imran Khan by Pakistan, because it's not giving air bases to the USA to control China and Russia. Indeed. And finally, Baljinder Sandhu hits a home run with a simple, "How many countries have you bombed and made millions homeless?" Good point, well made. Yes, indeed, Western hypocrisy. It's sometimes hard to defend the many military actions of the West, particularly in the last few decades. Dressed up in the clothes of the war on terror, the US, and by extension the UK, has launched several attacks on particularly the Middle East, and to be frank, with pretty appalling results. Many argue it has actually increased global terrorism. But all I would say is don't judge the West by its leaders. The last Iraq war had 1 million angry British people marching in London streets, demanding the UK not to join the US in that attack on another sovereign nation. And many people in both the US and UK are painfully aware of that hypocrisy acted out by our governments, and we do what we can on our side to call it out. Moral of the story to our commenters here is, two wrongs don't make a right. It's our responsibility on all sides to call out our leaders when they step over the mark. So we'll do our bit if you do yours. Now, after the same video, a very lively debate took off after Gurdev Singh reminded the world that Sikhs only want what was originally theirs in the first place, a Sikh kingdom. Ravi Sharma then states that in the original Sikh empire, Sikhs were actually a minority, as indeed were the British in the Raj, and before then the Islamic Mughals. Good point, well made. However, in a lengthy and intelligent response, Gurinder Singh explains that in fact Sikhs were the original indigenous people in the region, and the others merely invaders. He also highlighted the fact that the empire was renowned for its fairness, equality and respect towards all faiths in its population, contrasting strongly with the current Indian regime. And highlighting a very important point about partition, which many critics have brought up, he reminds everyone of the great betrayal meted out to Sikhs, who agreed to the initial plan of partition under the understanding they would then be given their own homeland after partition. A promise which was subsequently not just betrayed, but they found the Punjab then divided twice more in subsequent years by the Indian government. Now, a second very lively debate exploded after Ravneet SH brought up the terrible events of 1984, blaming it on Congress, later corrected by Deepinder Sidhu as Hindutva elements driving the attacks. He also reminded us of Narendra Modi's massacre of Muslims in Gujarat in 2002. But on a tangent, Irakcha makes a claim echoed by many other commenters that Khalistan is live in Canada and not in Punjab. To which Fateh Singh jumps in with a robust response pointing out the Khalistan referendum, which has been successfully rolled out across the diaspora around the whole world, attracting what he claims is 1.5 million Sikh voters. But his final comment is the most pertinent. Hold a referendum in Punjab and you'll find that the majority of Punjabis want out of India. Which really, we couldn't sum up any better. Now, many comments have been left across several of our videos saying that Sikhs in Punjab don't want their own homeland, but our response is very simple. Why is India so afraid then of holding a referendum in Punjab? We'll leave that one there. And finally, two short comments raise interesting thoughts. Firstly, ASVT2DS worries that India is currently heading down the path of becoming a new North Korea. And that's a sentiment echoed by user FT something or other, where he sums up the whole problem in one beautiful sentence. The difference is that the USA practice democracy, India just preaches it. And so, on to our next story, which also attracted rather a lot of attention. This was the revelation that Canadian Sikh politician Jagmeet Singh had been warned of death threats emanating from India. Now, this is a story that stems from the ongoing transnational repression against the Sikh diaspora from India. Combat X3373 simply said that there should be more campaigns to highlight how Sikhs are being treated in India. Well, we're doing our best here, but that is a good point. And Bob Bush highlights the point that it's not just Sikhs being marginalised in India, going as far as to say nearly 500 million non-Hindus are now what he calls stateless. This point is supported by the driving Hindutva nationalism that seems to be taking over the nation at the expense of the minorities. But maybe we're wrong. Patrick Dial gives us a hard slap and claims we're speaking rubbish, and the facts will show otherwise. Indeed, Patrick, let's see how the facts pan out and let history be the judge. And finally, Gaz demands that Canada and the US should shut India's embassies. Yep, that would certainly do it, but unfortunately India knows just how far it can push, and it has been doing so without incurring such penalties. Now, talking about death threats and transnational repression, our story revealing the admission by a former deputy of the NSA that Khalistan campaigners were legitimate targets of India, unsurprisingly caused a real storm. One very interesting debate began when Sita Surjit Kaler simply stated that Sikhs across the UK, Delhi and Punjab are all Khalistanis. To which a familiar pair of debating foes across our comments begin afresh. Neovask once again states that the movement for Khalistan is not supported in the Punjab, but more by the diaspora. To which Fateh Singh comes back with the old familiar cry of "Hold the referendum in the Punjab then." But here comes an interesting response from Neovask, and I must confess I didn't know this, that according to the Indian constitution, India is not allowed to hold any referenda over secessionism. So, even if 100% of Punjab's population wanted to secede, the constitution wouldn't allow it. An interesting point, but it is worth pointing out that any nation's constitution can be changed. It has been done countless times. India's constitution itself has actually been amended on several occasions. And also, I do seem to recall that the Sikh representatives in 1949 refused to sign that very same Indian constitution because it controversially regarded Sikhs as Hindus. Now, another commentator makes an interesting observation about India's intelligence agencies targeting of Khalistani campaigners for insulting India's flag. And here I do have to assume that this refers to the suspicious death of Avtar Singh Kandar, who was potentially murdered by India for the false accusation that he removed the flag from India's High Commission in London. Now, of course, insulting a nation's flag is indeed a highly emotive act and is guaranteed to raise anger from anyone patriotically attached to that flag. Neovask being a prime example, as he makes it very clear. But Ashler injects some common sense by adding that this in itself is not an act of terrorism, but purely criminal. And there's a huge difference, and this is where India's intelligence agencies are losing the argument and, in turn, damaging their own reputation. Their regular labelling of Khalistan campaigners as terrorists is just losing the moral high ground and losing them credibility on the world stage. And finally on this story, a regular commenter, Fateh Singh, reminds us all that the UK and Canada have both allowed independence referenda over Scotland and Quebec, both of which ignited huge anger and division in their respective countries. But in neither one did the intelligence agencies target high-profile campaigners for independence for assassination, nor indeed label them as terrorists. A simple reminder of basic democracy in action. And to wrap up Scotland, apparently Ashley Kandar thinks we insulted Scottish people in our coverage. God forbid. As someone who has lived in Scotland at the time of the referendum, and you may note my own name is as Scottish as it gets, I think it's very unlikely we'd be insulting the good people of Scotland. And so, a quick one on our coverage of the referendum in California. Knight Rider demands the referendum should go to the East Coast. Well, good news, Mr. Ryder. Apparently the next stage is indeed going to be in New York. Khalistan Zindabad, indeed. Now, one of my favourite stories this month was the celebration of Hola Mohalla. Now, I couldn't say it better than Pardeep Singh, who says Sikhs are a brave community. Well, as we set out in the story, Sikhs indeed do have a fabulous military history, and there's a very good reason why they remain some of the most decorated soldiers in the British Army. But here's an interesting point. Binti Kala warns Sikhs not to join the British Army in response to the possible murder of Bhai Kandar. But, and this is a point I raised earlier in the video, the British Army is not the British government. To remind our viewers not to judge the British, and that includes our army, by our politicians or indeed our government. They are most definitely not one and the same, as HC and Gaz rightly point out. And talking of the British government, in our story accusing Sunak and Modi governments of perpetuating colonialism, this provoked a predictably angry reaction. Jin Doug 19 can explain why Modi generates negative propaganda against Sikhs, obviously down to the forthcoming elections, but can't explain Sunak's behaviour in support. 2 words, Jin Doug 19, trade deal. That is simple as that, I'm afraid. And after the same story, Aisha makes a great point saying that Sikhs are committed to peace and being law-abiding, but then goes and spoils it by claiming that Khalistanis are extremists and align with Pakistani extremists, falling into that same fake news trap generated by years of Indian government propaganda. And talking of which, after our story covering the medal awarded to the founder of the BJP, Amit Sanodia blasts us for broadcasting what he calls Khalistani propaganda. Indeed, sir, it's called redressing the balance, something which the Indian media, now languishing in 161st place in the World Free Press Index, still struggles to do. But thank you anyway for the observation. So that is it from me this time. We do love your comments, so do please keep them coming. Even the critical ones. We do read them all and we laugh or squirm as appropriate as we do. And we've enjoyed many of your interesting and often very heated debates in the comments section, so keep at it and maybe we'll feature one of your comments in a future programme. But in the meantime, thanks for watching and for your continuing support of the channel. It's all very much appreciated. In the meantime, we'll see you next time.